What is happening, everybody? It is MLB trade deadline day. We still got some news trickling in here. We just found out, as I see people in the YouTube chat have pointed out, Jack Flaherty traded to the Los Angeles Dodgers. Potentially some other names still to come in trades as well. So we don't have quite as many lineups as we would normally have at this time on Live Before Lock while we're starting, but that's what'll happen on trade deadline day. A lot of pieces still to move. We'll see what ends up happening with the team. Like the White Sox, they still have a lineup to come, but we do have a lot of interesting talking points on the slate, some crazy high ownership in some spots, and Eric is going to be joining me here to break it all down. So as you guys are watching, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, sponsored today by Bet365. If you guys want to check out Bet365, they got a great deal there. They just went live in Pennsylvania as well. So if you guys live in Pennsylvania and you haven't heard about Bet365, take advantage. You sign up, minimum deposit $10, place a $5 bet, and you get $150 in bonus bets. So go check out Bet365. We got links down below in the YouTube description box. Easy way to help build your bankroll. If you already know has a gambling problem, call or text the number 1-800-GAMBLER. Eric, what's up, man?
Not much. Just watching all the trade news come in. Eloy Jimenez, the O's, is an interesting one. Didn't see that one. Jack Flaherty going to the National League. A lot of people saw that one coming, but some other people didn't. What do you think of the trade deadline so far?
Not as so. There was a lot of move. So a couple things. First off, the value of relief pitchers got crazy high this year. Teams are willing to trade like a ton to get relievers. And then beyond that, there weren't a lot of big names that necessarily moved from place to place. Like, we just found out Jack Flaherty was traded. We did also find out that Eloy Jimenez was traded. That was one that wasn't really expected, but there wasn't any like crazy earth-shattering moves that came out of left field. You know, like the Eloy one, I guess, is the closest thing to that, but that's not like a major market mover or anything.
No, it wasn't a major market mover. And, we've had like Manny Machado going at deadlines, Juan Soto going at deadlines, and we didn't have like a Vlad Guerrero Jr., somebody that was getting thrown around as a name. We didn't get like that big, huge impact bat going any direction. But I mean, the Dodgers probably winning the trade deadline in the last couple minutes there. Jack Flaherty, I mean, that's the best player who got traded to the best team probably. So that's the one that I think matters the most. But otherwise, pretty uneventful in a lot of ways. A lot of reunion stuff, like Jorge Soler going back to Atlanta. Yeah. We've had a number of those weird ones. Well, Ahmed Rosario going back to the Dodgers. We've seen some of that, but otherwise, no major impact bat, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I'm really interested to see how some of these moves could potentially change our ownership. I think as far as the pitchers go, it's not going to move around all that much just because so many of these pitchers, it's still like spots that we generally expect. It's not like one of these pitchers was in a difficult matchup and is all of a sudden in a really easy matchup or anything like that. I do think there's going to be some really watered down offenses, not just for today, but also the rest of the year. But some teams that did make trades, they're just going to be shorthanded at offense and they're going to make them pretty unappealing stacks. But it's also teams that generally we probably wanted to be picking on anyway. So we'll see what happens as we end up going here. Maybe another trade or two ends up trickling in. But let's start breaking it down, Eric. And no pitchers on today's slate priced above 10K on DK. The most expensive is Tyler Glasnow at 10K. Here are three pitchers that are 9K or above. Two of them are very popular. One of them is contrarian. Glasnow at 10K is 28% owned against the Padres. Hunter Brown at 9K is 33% owned against the Pittsburgh Pirates. Then your contrarian option, Luis Castillo on the road in Boston, only pulling 3% ownership. So considering these are our three pay-up options, Glasnow, Castillo, and then Hunter Brown, which of these three do you like the most?
Hunter Brown. Pittsburgh, he gets the best matchup. Glasnow taking on San Diego. I don't know what's going on with Petco this year, but the ballpark has played way up for power. And as I'm running my stuff, I've got Tyler Glasnow in 30% of lineups. Hunter Brown in 40% of lineups. Tyler Glasnow in 30. So I guess I'm overweight to both of them ever so slightly. We have a ton of negative leverage coming in on Robbie Ray, which I understand, but I was very heavily in Robbie Ray's corner last time out. It's just that classic, like, oh, now everybody saw it, and now that everybody wants to play it at 8,200. So, like, as we look at the most popular pitchers, I know we're focused on the top of the board, but Hunter Brown is the guy in our tools that, despite the 4 opposition total, I do think he's at 9K going to end up being my highest owned pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the other pitchers on the high end, and here's where I'm at with the different guys. I don't have Glasnow's matchup on the road in San Diego. While Glasnow has been very good this year, he hasn't necessarily been probably as good as people think of him to be. Once again, really good,
Right.
but still, you look at the numbers overall for Tyler Glasnow, and it's a 3.47 ERA, 2.63 expected ERA, strikeout rate 33%, which once again are all really good marks. But he's not necessarily been like the Cy Young pitcher that I think a lot of people necessarily make him out to be. And then also the matchup is not necessarily ideal against the San Diego Padres. So I like Tyler Glass now, but my favorite is just like you, Hunter Brown, who outside of a couple of horrific starts, like horrifically horrific starts early in the year. I mean, you're talking about like a start against the Kansas City Royals where he gets like one out and gives up like 9 runs. His numbers for the year, so it's the 4 ERA, the 3.4 expected ERA, strikeout rate for him has also been pretty decent there, 25%. But he's been sneakily better than people think, just because a couple of those outings at the beginning of the year, we had a rough beginning of the year. It accounts for such a large percentage of the runs that he's given up for the entire year. Not to say those should be discounted. There's certainly a little bit of a boom bust aspect to Hunter Brown. But if you look at his numbers, he has had, let's see, since May 17th, Eric, he's only had one start where he's given up more than 3 runs. Early on in the season, it was happening like a bunch of times when you go out. I mentioned that start against the Royals. It was 2 outs he got, and he gave up 9 runs. He had a start against the Rangers, 3 innings, 5 runs. Against the Guardians, 5 innings, 6 runs. Those starts are behind him. He has actually been one of the best pitchers in the American League over the last couple of months. So if I'm paying up for a starting pitcher, Hunter Brown's the guy for me.
Yep, Hunter Brown for me too.
Any interest in Luis Castillo just because he is so low owned?
I looked at it for a long time. I'm on the over of 17.5 outs for him over on pick 6 today. I don't think I'm going to end up getting there in any of them. I am playing 150 today, and yeah, right now I'm just looking at my last run here. I have 2% Luis Castillo. He's 3.5%. If you wanted to get to some for positive leverage, awesome. I think he's got to eat innings no matter what, considering the back half of this bullpen just got used up. They do have 7, 8, 9, like their main guys, their setup guys. Munoz for sure can close today. Everybody's set up well for the good pitchers in that bullpen. But if this does go south on him, I still think he eats the innings. So 17.5 outs, fire that up as a bet. But DFS, I don't really see a need to get there.
We've got the question for cash games from Hey, I'm Drew 95 in the Discord channel. If anybody else has questions for us, hit us up in the Discord if you're a stochastic sub. We could answer them. Hey, I'm Drew wants to know, who would we be wanting to play in a DK cash game? And I do think it gets kind of interesting at pitcher, right? Because one of the options, pretty obvious here. Robbie Ray is projected for 50% ownership. We'll be talking shortly about the merits of his ownership in tournaments. For cash games, pretty easy. You're going to play Robbie Ray. And then you have the pay up question. Do you want to go to Hunter Brown or Tyler Glasnow for cash games? I do prefer Hunter Brown for cash games as well as GPPs. Do you feel any differently?
Nope, I do too. It would be Ray and Brown for me.
Yeah, so those two, and then at offense, just load up on the Seattle Mariners.
Yep.
It's funny because Mariner stacks ended up being really good yesterday, Eric, other than one issue. You needed to have Nick Pivetta in your lineup. So, like, while the Mariners stacks were pretty good, you weren't getting Nick Pivetta in the lineups with the Mariners. So it ended up being problematic, especially when there was, a couple of, who was it? The Yankees and the Mets and the Red Sox each ended up scoring a ton of runs in their individual games. So ended up being a spot where, like, hey, Mariner, if you told me the Mariners scored 7 runs going into this last, I'd be like, we're going to end up crushing it. Ended up not really being the case because Nick Pivetta was even better on the other side there. But for cash games today, I think you want to go right back to the Seattle. And we didn't like the Mariners for cash games yesterday. We liked them for GPPs.
Yep.
But you certainly want to be going back to the Mariners as well as the Arizona Diamondbacks. So for pitcher, I think you want to be looking at, like we said, Robbie Ray and Hunter Brown. Then for your offenses, I think you want to be looking at Mariners hitters as well as Diamondbacks hitters. Diamondbacks drawing a matchup against Patrick Corbin. And then you got the Mariners going up against James Paxton. I don't know why the Red Sox were so keen to go and get James Paxton. We've talked about how bad he's been numerous times throughout the course of the year. So considering the price points on the Seattle Mariners, the struggles of James Paxton, that's the chalk of the slate. I think they're a little bit too popular in tournaments today. Cash games, though, load up on them. Anything else that stands out to you for offenses in cash games?
Nope, you said all the smart things. I mean, it's you're paying up for a bunch of Seattle, like the main Seattle bats, Cal Raleigh, Randy Rosarena. You're gonna play those guys in cash today. Yesterday was awesome because I did end up on Red Sox. Talked about that at the end of the show, where I just thought there was a lot of leverage for getting a pitcher from Seattle who's popular out of there. Hi, Dookie. Hey, buddy. But Luis Castillo today, probably not going to be pulling the trigger as much against him, even though I think there's some merits to it. But yesterday you had a popular-ish projected Lucas Gilbert or Mr. Gilbert there. Luis Castillo not going to be doing the same thing today.
Yeah, we got Luis Castillo projected for 3.5% ownership on our last update. If you guys go and refresh it, I think we did have one that came in pretty recently there for our pitchers, and yeah, 3.6% there on Luis Castillo. But let's talk about the 8K range, which has an uber popular pitcher. Robbie Ray, nearly 50% owned, 47% is the mark that we have on him. The other pitchers in the 8K range, not all that popular. Max Scherzer is 14% owned, and then Justin Steele, Michael Wacha, Matt Waldron, all of them are 8% owned. Let's start with Robbie Ray, Eric. He is crazy popular. He's going up against what's been a really good offense over the course of the last month and a half now in the Oakland A's. So Robbie Ray's ownership at $8,200. We like him for cash games. What are you going to do with him in GPPs? $8,200 and very popular.
It sucks because, like, I was very heavy on Robbie Ray, talked about him quite a bit on the last slate. He ended up just nuking the Dodgers. Whether or not that's because he pitches well at Dodger Stadium, like Sean V would like people to know. I don't even know if he said that. I just assumed that because, like, that's the way I think Sean V thinks. But Robbie Ray was awesome right from the get-go. He looked good in AAA and a couple of those rehab starts coming back. Talked about it. Bet is over 4.5Ks, over 5.5Ks. I can't get to 50% ownership on Robbie Ray today. He only got to 86 pitches. I mean, there was a little bit more than like the 80-ish that he had pitched before. And, you know, whether or not you want to say 3.38 ERA in AAA matters, whatever, I don't care. It's the PCL, man. And Robbie Ray pitched pretty well there from the get-go. Goes into the Dodger Stadium, hitter-friendly environment. Awesome. Now he's pitching in San Francisco. Like, I get why the ownership is where it is. He also gets Oakland instead of the Dodgers. I get why the ownership is where it is, but 50% is just too much here. I've got him in 30% of my lineups. Again, I'm going to be almost half the field here.
I have less than that of Robbie Ray. I have him in 20% of lineups. And yeah, points per dollar, I think he's the best points per dollar pitcher on this. It's just the ownership is so crazy high. And the matchup against the Oakland A's, like going forward, I don't think the Oakland A's are going to have like the best offense in baseball or anything like that. But like we've said a few times over the course of the last week, the A's offense, it's better than most people give them credit for. It's not completely terrible. And Robbie Ray is also a pitcher who, even in his best days, which maybe he's still in them, we don't really know. He hasn't pitched at all over the last couple of years. He was extremely erratic, where you could have a guy who looks like a Cy Young candidate one day, and then the next day he has one of those Hunter Brown type outings against the Kansas City Royals where he completely gets blown up. So I am at less than half the field on Robbie Ray, and I think the Oakland A's are a pretty interesting leverage stack as well. It is so much ownership going to Robbie Ray. It is not really that much to do with him individually as much as it's just a crazy high mark. It's an 11-game slate, and we've got a pitcher who's very boom or bust. It's 50% owned. It's kind of like the Nick Pivetta situation yesterday, where you could easily see a scenario where Robbie Ray is working his slider. He's got his strikeout stuff going. And he puts up a start like he did against the Dodgers and goes like 5 innings, gives up, 1 run with like 8 or 9 strikeouts. Or you could see the other thing where he just can't throw a strike. Do you remember the first inning of Robbie Ray's start against the Dodgers?
Yeah. Didn't he have a couple walks? He had like 2 walks in the middle of it.
Yeah, so the game started, he got, I believe he got the first hitter out. Then he walked a hitter, hit somebody by pitch, hit another guy by pitch, then walked a run in. And you're just watching that going like, oh my God, Robbie Ray, this is not going well for him in his first start. Manager comes out to visit, seems like he is in all kinds of dire straits. And then if I remember correctly, there's like a 107-mile-per-hour hit ground ball that turns into a double play. If that ball finds the gap, all of a sudden you're looking at a game where it's like, oh, look, Robbie Ray is, down 3-0 in the first inning. He's only gotten 1 run. But because there's a good defensive play made behind him, it salvages the outing. He regathers himself, ends up looking good for the rest of the start. I still think it was a very boom-bust pitcher. If people want to play him, I'm not going to talk you out of him. I just think the ownership is too high for him to be overweight to the field to him in tournaments.
100% with you.
Are there any pivots that stand out to you in the 8K range?
In the 8K range, no. Not anybody that I'm running to the window to play. Max Scherzer's appropriately owned. Michael Wacha appropriately owned. Justin Steele, really tough matchup, appropriately owned. I don't really see any reason to be jamming anybody else. Matt Waldron, I have 8% of too. So no, I think everybody's about appropriately owned. Do you have anybody that you like? Because I really don't.
I'm about double the field on Justin Steele. He's only 8% owned. He's been really, really good. 3.08 ERA, 3.04 expected ERA for the year, 23% strikeout rate. He's been one of the best pitchers in the National League 3 consecutive years now, 2022, 2023, 2024. Justin Steele is an established ace at this point, and he just never really quite gets treated like it. So is he better than Robbie Wright? Yeah, I actually do think that he's probably better than Robbie Wright. Now, the matchup is more difficult considering that he's pitching on the road in Cincinnati. It's a very hitter-friendly ballpark, so that is certainly a concern. But I don't think that he should be, a 7th or a 6th the ownership of Robbie. Like I don't think Robbie. If this slate plays out 10 times, I think Justin Steele outscores Robbie Ray more than twice. So that's my favorite pivot to get to in this range is Justin Steele.
I like that.
There's also strikeouts to be had in that
Cincinnati. Yeah. And you're getting Ellie De La Cruz from his worst side. So I think everything does check out for firing up some Justin Steele. I might give him a little bit of a boost. I mean, this guy's been so good to me in my DFS life. So yeah, I'm happy to get to a little bit more there. I only have 4% right now, so I'm going to change that around. I think Justin Steele, I would say, is close to appropriately owned, but there's no doubt positive leverage in the top pitchers tool. You have a case for getting to double digit for sure.
And then here's what I'm kind of struggling with a little bit, because I don't think Michael Wacha is great, but I'm really interested to see what the final version of the White Sox lineup is today. Because I think Michael Wacha maybe get a share or two of them. Kind of one of the guys at the top where I said, you might get a pitcher who looks like he's in a better spot, but it's not going to be anything that like completely changes the slate. I almost would never play Michael Wacha at, $8,700. But this White Sox lineup without Eloy Jimenez in it and whatever other trades end up trickling in, this could be a matchup that's even easier than what it appears to be on paper. So an 8% on Michael Wacha, he's somebody who I think is worth getting shares of and potentially a couple more shares depending on what that lineup is in a few minutes.
Gotcha.
Let's move on then. 7K pitchers, Eric. In the 7K range, we have a bunch of pitchers and nobody gives a shit about any of them. We've got Sean Manaea is 8% owned. Every single other pitcher in the 7K range is 2% owned or less. Do you like anybody that's priced at 7K? The only one the field is playing is Sean Manaea against your Minnesota Twins.
No, not a single one. I'm looking through this. I have 1 share of Lance Lynn. I have 2 shares of JP Sears. I have 2 shares of Bryce Elder, and that is it. That's my entire 7K exposure. Other than Sean Manaea, 5%.
My most rostered pitcher in the 7K range is Lance Lynn at 3%. Underweight to the field on Sean Manaea, not getting him in lineups. I don't love the matchup he has against the Minnesota Twins. And these other pitchers, it's just not very good options. We've got Sean Manaea, Lance Lynn, James Paxton. We've already talked about how bad he is. We've got Lyon Richardson, Cal Quantrill, JP Sears, Bryce Elder, Patrick Corbin is 7K now on the road against Arizona. No, most of these pitchers are going up against popular offenses because they are individually not good and people want to be stacking against them. This is pretty much a dead price range to me.
Why is Lyon Richardson pitching in a baseball game today?
Let's look him up. Let's see.
Dude, have you seen his numbers in AAA? They're so bad.
I mean, these are all the pitchers that called up this year. All these guys for like in the mid-20s.
5.13 xFIP and like a 290 BABIP. So like, I mean, the ball's, I guess, getting in play maybe a little bit too much, but like, I mean, this is just absurd. Basically 20.5% K rate, 13.5% walk rate, and a 5.1 xFIP.
Yeah, we've got. I mean, it's a little weird because the Reds are actually a team that's like vying for a playoff spot. Not they're very likely to make it or anything, but we've seen a lot of shitty teams this year call up a pitcher we haven't heard of. You go look at their minor league stats. Every single time they have an ERA where it's like, oh, look, his ERA is like 4.5 to 5 or higher. Every single time. I don't really understand. Maybe there's something I'm missing with what the strategy is there. but it happens just time and time again. Richardson's made 4 starts in the major leagues this year, 8.64 ERA, 8.07 expected ERA. And also his numbers, it's not just this year. You go to previous years, they were also terrible. So it's really, really hard to figure out what's going on here. He throws hard. Maybe they're like, oh, he's got a fastball that could touch 100 miles per hour. Maybe that's something that's at least worth them trying to get extra looks at, but he's not a ranked prospect in the organization or anything like that. He was a second round draft pick in 2018. So he's got a little bit of a draft acumen. And also then his first year at rookie ball, 7.14 ERA, 5.54 FIP back in 2018. So the guy sucked pretty much everywhere he's pitched. He's been bad when he's pitched at the major league level. All of his projections are terrible, even though he's projected to be a reliever. Like, for example, Zips, as a reliever, hasn't projected a 5.47 ERA the rest of the year. Yep. So, yeah, I think the guy's a train wreck. I would much, much prefer stacking against him than rostering him.
I'm 100% with you. It's more of just like what is going on? Because like we've had a couple of these times where a 7,500 pitcher, like I've liked a couple of these guys sitting in the mid range, and we've been really, really good at like breaking down some of these AAA pitchers this year and like finding an edge here and there. I can't find a redeeming quality. And I also think 7,500 is like the most mispriced pitcher we've had in a really long time, just because he should be a flat 4K.
Let's talk about the cheapies then, Eric, where once again, not all that much interest from the field. Of the pitchers below 7K, it's not completely an unknown pricing range. We've got Joe Ross, 8% owned, Griffin Canning, 13% owned, David Festa at 6K, he is 9% owned. We did see a pitcher who was 4K yesterday. His name is slipping me right now. The guy who started for the Houston Astros.
Wilson, last name Wilson.
I don't think it was Wilson. It was, I'll figure this out. It was
the Braves guy, right?
It was the guy who looked like Kenny Powers.
If somebody will say it.
Right. Holmes. Right. So Garrett Holmes. Garrett Holmes went out and struck out like every single hitter that he faced, even though he only pitched limited. Like he was able to put up 24 fantasy points while only throwing a handful of pitches. Yeah. In general, I don't think that we should expect that to be the norm for guys for any kind of pitch restrictions or whatever. But all that aside, cheap pitchers today, we've got 13% ownership, like I said, going to Griffin Canning. If I'm picking one pitcher, it's Griffin Canning's the one that's most interesting to me just because he's pitching at home against the Rockies. It is rare you get a cheap pitcher who's at home against the Rockies that has reasonable ownership. And Griffin Canning's 13% owned at $6,700. So if I'm looking to save salary, he's the guy I like going to.
I like going to it too, but like is a bad word. I do have a lot of Colorado too, for whatever it's worth. I know it's not Coors Field. I know that this isn't as good, but I'll have some Griffin Canning. I'll have some Colorado bats.
Yeah. Let me see. Did I get Rocky stacks on the slate?
I sure did.
No, I have 2 3-man stacks of them.
I have 6%.
Griffin Canning back in the day was a top pitching prospect, got called up, found some early success, had a UCL injury in, 2021? I think it was a partially torn UCL and tried to pitch through. It went very poorly. He had a 5.6 ERA, 4.73 expected ERA. It was really never the same ever since he tried to pitch through that elbow injury. This year, he's got a 5.04 ERA, a 4.87 expected ERA. He doesn't generate strikeouts. So it's not that Griffin Canning is good. It's like, what's shittier? The Colorado Rockies offense or Griffin Canning? And it probably is the Colorado Rockies offense. Now, this isn't a spot that I'm heavily invested in. I have 15% of Griffin Canning's like a little bit overweight to the field. So not any kind of massive stand or anything, but more so if you guys are building a lineup and you need to save salary, I'm going to say Griffin Canning is the guy to go to. Are there any of these other cheap pitchers that you're liking, Eric?
Yeah, Ryan Nelson, I wanted to at least ask you about because he's pitched a lot better over the last month or so. He did give up, 4 earned in Kansas City. I think that's all right, whatever. But before that, he had a lot of like extended outings. The ground ball rate isn't insane, but it's gotten better. I'm looking through a couple of different things. Like, I don't know what to make of it, but like he's been a lot better on the road than at home. I still don't care. I mean, Washington, I played a bunch of yesterday, talked about them in depth. They had 6 runs through 2 innings, didn't end up mattering, but like I don't like Ryan Nelson, but I do think that there's at least merit in getting to a team that got worse. I know that also we see Lane Thomas play a lot better from the right side, but or sorry, against lefties than he's going to against righties. But this is without him, I would say a downgrade of a lineup. I think any version of it here where you're going to have Travis Blankenhorn showing up here playing second base more than likely today, but Jacob Young being one of your outfielders, Harold Ramirez, an everyday outfielder, and James Wood, who is pretty good, but higher order there. Lane Thomas not in this lineup. I think it's got to be a little bit worse. And I mean, 4 implied run total here. Ryan Nelson at home. I feel like there's some merit to getting down here, but currently only have 5%.
Yeah, and there was also so there it is. People in the chat have corrected us here. So there was the 2 min price guys. Both of them did well yesterday. Holmes for the Braves, he was the one who was a little bit more needed for Jeep. Well, needed not necessarily, but had the better points per dollar result. But then even Taylor Scott ended up throwing how many pitches?
Yep.
35 pitches, 3 perfect innings with 4 strikeouts. So both of them in price guys in limited work ended up being pretty good yesterday. I don't think we should expect that to happen again today, but since people are going to ask about it, Griffin Canning for me, you can make a case for some of these other guys as well, but nothing that I think should be a massive part of your portfolio or anything. Are there any other pitchers that stand out to you on DK?
Nope, I don't think so. Jonathan Cannon sucks. David Festa is going to gain a little bit of ownership because he's 6K. He is so bad, even though I wanted to like, ooh, there's maybe some strikeout stuff coming up there. No. This is not going to be good for David Festa.
All right. Let's talk about the FanDuel pitchers then. And we've only got 4 guys pulling ownership on FanDuel. Nothing that's surprising. Tyler Glass now is 18% owned against the Padres. Hunter Brown is 15% owned against the Pirates. We got Justin Steele, 10% owned against the Reds. Then Robbie Ray, he's your chalk on FanDuel, 26% owned at $9,300 against the Oakland A's. And of these 4 pitchers, not only do we have Robbie Ray projected for the most ownership, we've been projected with the lowest odds of being the top scoring pitcher on the slate. If I'm rostering one pitcher in a FanDuel tournament, Eric, I'm going to go to Hunter Brown.
Hunter Brown all day.
Yeah, so Hunter Brown, we have Hunter Brown and Tyler Glass now projected fairly comparably. 8.3% chance for Glass now to be the highest scoring pitcher on the slate, 7.5% chance for Hunter Brown. Brown is also $800 cheaper. He's lower owned amongst the 2 of them as well. Robbie Ray, the only issue I have with him on FanDuel, kind of the same deal on DraftKings. He's super popular for a slate of this size and considering the variance he brings to the table. So I'd be looking to get away from Robbie Ray, not as like a 0% owned guy if I was playing a bunch of lineups, but I wouldn't be near the 26%. Hunter Brown, I like getting to him for half of the ownership and also a better projection in our data than Robbie Ray.
Beautiful.
Anything else that stands out to you, the FanDuel pitchers? Is there like a contrarian option outside of Hunter Brown? I know he's not all that. He's 15% owned, so it's not like crazy ownership or anything like that, but any single digit owned pitchers that you think should be picking up more ownership?
Yeah, I'm going through a couple of these guys for FanDuel, not playing there again today, full disclosure, but I ran my stuff here as you were talking, and it looks like getting to a little bit of Matt Waldron over here as well, 8,700. So he's a little bit cheaper than the Ray, Glass, now Brown, Steele, Walker, Scherzer tier that are all guys that are pulling more ownership than him. It's scary. It's the Dodgers. This ballpark's played ridiculous, but Matt Waldron, knuckleballer, we're starting to see him get hit up. We broke that all down last time that he showed up on a slate, and but he's 4% owned. I think that at 8,700, there's a little bit of that. Luis Castillo also would be more interested, 3.2% ownership. I think low ownership there. Griffin Cannon, 7,100. I think gets some Griffin Canning there. Going through everybody else here, there's really not anything else. Those 3, Sean Manaea, not really getting to him. I thought I would against my Twins, but the Twins have been, I mean, just absolute lefty killers this year. 117 WRC plus, not striking out a ton at 20.3%, which is a little surprising, but yeah, it's basically those. Waldron showing up the most, and then Luis Castillo second, Griffin Canning third. I'd be playing like, still single digits of each, but I'd have over the field on each.
Holy fuck, look at this Miami Marlins lineup. It doesn't matter because they're not on the slate, so this doesn't impact anything. This team is going to be absolute dog shit on offense the rest of the year.
Oh my God.
Edwards, Berger, Rivera,
DH,
Sanchez, Bride, Lopez, Brujan, Gordon, Fortes. I don't know that that's a single. What's like the expected WRC plus for that lineup? Like 75 or something?
It's got to be less than that.
Terrible.
It's less than that. I mean, that's the worst lineup that we've seen all year. That's the worst lineup we've seen all year.
It's not great. Well, it's not just that it's a bad lineup. It's like this is their lineup for the next couple of months. This is just what they're going to be rolling with. But there's going to be a lot of chalk pitchers against the Miami Marlins going forward.
Yeah, it's going to be hilarious.
All right, we got some super chats here, so let's answer those and then queue up the lineup generator, Jordan. We'll start building some lineups in that. But first, Jake DeWitt left us a super chat. It is not really a question, just more a general statement here, but we can react to it. He says that he is way underweight on Ray, but he's not getting to any of Oakland. Yeah, if you want to get some Oakland, just do a ROI boost in the Sims and boost the A's up a little bit and you'll get to them. One thing also, the A's are so low owned. They're like 0.6% owned. So one of the reasons you're not going to be getting to a lot of them in the Sims is just because they're not expected to be in many of the field's lineups. But yeah, that is definitely, if you are running the Sims unencumbered, you are not going to be getting to very much a Robbie Ray, but you also won't be getting to a ton of Oakland on the other side. I'm going to force Oakland into some of my lineups here. And then shout out to Chris Williams, who gifted out 5 YouTube memberships. As always, Chris, thank you very much for supporting the channel. And in Discord, no other questions right now. So let's look at these lineups and see what it is that we're getting to. Build, even though it's a big slate, make contrarian lineups, Jordan, just because I want to see how that impacts some of our Robbie Ray exposure. I have a feeling building contrarian lineups, he won't show up in like anything. So I'm just kind of curious on that. Yeah, Robbie Ray, Tyler Glass now, Justin Steele, Matt Waldron. Yeah, looks like we didn't get really, if you build contrarian lineups today, Robbie Ray doesn't show up in anything. Interesting. Go to stack exposures. Lots of Seattle, no surprise there. Kansas City, we've got Chicago. So those are our 3 teams that we have north of 10% of. And I mean, one thing of note here, if you are building lineups that don't have Robbie Ray, that is just going to be by default, at least somewhat contrarian here. So what are you going to do in single entry though, Eric? Is there a particular stack that stands out to you for this slate? The only one that's really popular is Seattle.
Yeah, Seattle's the only team that's really popular here today. I really like the Atlanta Braves going up against Joe Ross. I know that Joe Ross isn't going to pull any kind of like crazy ownership at single digits, but this is an Atlanta team. I've brought it up multiple times. I think that they're going to look better going forward. This is Joe Ross that's out there on the mound. He's the most, it's the most leveraged team in our top stack tool here today as well. 9th inning bump for Atlanta. Single entry there currently it for me. There's a case for going to the A's against a 50% owned Robbie Ray, but I'm playing the $50-$25 here. I'm playing currently 5-man Atlanta Braves.
I'm stuck in between a couple of teams. The team I don't want to play is the Seattle Mariners just because of how popular they're going to be. Large field GPPs, that's my most rostered stack, is the Seattle Mariners. For small field stuff, where I think the Mariners are probably going to be like 20 to 25% owned, I'd rather look elsewhere. 2 teams that I'm in between then. 1, the Chicago Cubs against Lyon Richardson, who we just talked about. I don't think the Cubs are going to be crazy popular in smaller field stuff with all the field flocking to Seattle Mariners, but it's clearly a great spot for the Cubs. Also a really good ballpark in Cincinnati. That's a team I'm very still on considering. The other one, just because I think Robbie Ray is going to be crazy popular, is the Oakland A's.
Perfect.
Maybe I don't usually do this. Maybe I'll mix it up. Maybe I'll play a Cubs stack and like half my single entry and then go with an A's stack and some.
I've been really looking at doing that lately because like, you just enter a couple of them and, you usually just run the same lineup. But like, I do think that there's merit for just getting to a couple of different stacks within these, just especially today. I mean, there's just so many positive spots. I think there's like 3 or 4 that you can get to from a stack perspective that when you get to the flip, when we get to the lineup generator, we go to the post contest sims, we're going to see, I think, Atlanta, Oakland, Milwaukee, potentially Minnesota being all some of the best positively leveraged stacks to get to, some of the highest ROI stacks to get to. I also think Boston, I brought them up yesterday. They ended up being I had like a couple of lineups, ended up winning, a couple $100 just that salvaged my night from a DFS perspective, purely because, Boston went completely nuclear against Gilbert. You still needed to win anything. You needed to still find some way to get to Pavetta, but I didn't have any Pavetta as much there with that, but I had a ton of Boston stacks, and I feel pretty darn good running that back here at 5% against Castillo.
Yeah, I don't love the spot against Luis Castillo to where I'd want to play them in single entry.
I
I
don't think
think they
so either.
want. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just talking through it. Like, I mean, it's the same thing. Like, you could get to a little of San Diego against Glass now, but like, yeah, single entry, I'm not going to do it. I'm also not going to go Oakland in single entry, even though I like them for a large field. I mean, I'm rolling Atlanta right now unless something changes here. Yeah, I'm just looking through some of my top ROI lineups and trying to decide. I think Atlanta's just kind of like the team that is my number 1, number 3, number 9, like in terms of lineup order.
Yeah, if you're going completely off the walls, that's where the Oakland A's potentially come into play, where you're getting some leverage. It's a very low probability stack outcome, though. The team that I do think overall is the best for single entry in terms of people are looking for a team with a lot of upside, but also isn't going to potentially totally suck in the way that the Oakland A's could, it would be the Chicago Cubs going up against Lyon Richardson. So those are the two teams that I am most highly considering there for a single entry. But then, Eric, for large field GPPs, which are the teams that stand out to the most to you from that standpoint as a stack?
Yeah, I love getting to the Mariners here. I have no problem getting to the Mariners against James Paxton. He had a good outing in that game that I went to, Dodgers, Red Sox, Sunday Night Baseball, and then all of a sudden DFA'd because the underlying metrics still aren't there. The Dodgers are aware of it. Boston, I guess maybe they have good juju bringing him back here. I don't really get it, but 343 xWOBA, 16.5% K rate, 12.5% walk rate. He's been better over the last month, but like at the same time, I don't really give a shit. I think Mariners in this kind of hitting environment, wind blowing out, Fenway Park, great ballpark. Give me the Mariners as the highest owned in large field. They will be for me, for sure.
Yeah, for the field as well, but it's still a totally different scenario for single entry
Correct.
contest versus large field stuff, because in single entry, I think the Mariners are going to be 20 to 25% owned. In large field, I think they're going to be like 12 to 13% owned is what we have projected. So that makes a massive difference there. If you run everything through the Sims and don't touch anything, you're going to get the Mariners as the team that stands out the most. And I think that makes pretty good sense. You see here from the lineup generator, the players we're getting the most from the Mariners is Randy Arozarena, your home run pick from yesterday, who did end up coming through, Eric. We had both home run picks hit yesterday. TJ Frattle did as well. Randy Arozarena, we've got Victor Robles, Justin Turner, Dylan Moore, Cal Raleigh, Mitch Garver. So those are most rostered hitters there from the Mariners. Some one-off hitters that also showed up. There's Bobby Witt Jr., Bobby Witt Jr. and Aaron Judge, I don't know. These guys never have bad games. Juan Soto as well, to a lesser extent. But, these guys just don't ever seem to have bad games. So Bobby Witt at shortstop, showing up a bunch, 28% there as of one-off. Anything else you want to shout out about these lineups? If not, we'll build some FanDuel ones.
No, Justin Steele. Look at him climbing up the board. So I think that was a sharp call by you.
Yeah, I like some Justin Steele to be contrarian. Let's do FanDuel lineups, Jordan. FanDuel time. And if you guys want to sign up for the lineup generator, it's less than $15. You get access to our Discord package as well. And then if you want to alter these lineups in any way, player projections, ownership projections, they're all in here. So if you want to change one of the players, you'll see all those projections and you can make some little alterations to some of the lineups there. FanDuel, we are getting to the most of Tyler Glass now, Hunter Brown. Here's what's different at offense, though. The Red Sox are showing up like crazy on FanDuel. Devers, Yoshida, we've got Duran here also. All three of those hitters north of 30% of our lineups. So, Eric, I know you had mentioned potentially liking the Red Sox as a contrarian stack on DK. How about them being our most rostered stack by a lot on FanDuel? This is some of the boldest lineups I've seen all year.
Well, I get it. All you have to do is look at the Vegas implied total. It kind of tells you everything you need to know as far as this is a different spot than you would normally think against Luis Castillo. You're in Fenway. It's 85, 70% humidity, winds blowing out 10 to 15. This is going to play like a very, very small ballpark today. And with Duran and the speed you get from him, David Hamilton batting 8th, the speed you get from him, there's speed and power. Brought that up yesterday. It's a tough ask for any right-handed pitcher in Fenway in these kind of conditions. So I get it. It is a team that I think looking at their ownership for both DK and FanDuel, I mean, it's not as good as yesterday where you had a popular Lucas Gilbert to some extent, but even though Luis Castillo isn't pulling ownership, the implied total has us getting there.
Yeah, it's definitely favorable hitting conditions. I don't know. I think the betting line would be a little bit too high in that spot, considering that, like, I don't think Luis Castillo sucks or anything, but
No.
it does give you some reason to at least consider the Red Sox. But yeah, it's a ton of ownership that we're getting there on them. We also got the Diamondbacks, the Cubs, the Royals, the Mariners, the Astros, all other teams that are pulling north of 10% exposure in our lineups here for FanDuel purposes. Are there any teams that stand out to you more on FanDuel than they do on DraftKings?
Red Sox. I mean, this is very surprising, I think, in some extent. Arizona's popular on DK as well. Chicago's pretty popular-ish. Kansas City is popular on DK. Seattle's obviously popular on DK. Houston, that's kind of an interesting one that isn't really showing up in my lineups, even though Bailey Falter, if you want to stack against Bailey Falter in Minute Maid Park, which just played fifth for home runs in terms of if you take off the 3-year rolling average on Baseball Savant, you just look at Minute Maid Park. For whatever reason, that's playing for up for home runs this year as well. So it's a ballpark that would play a little bit smaller against Bailey Falter, who absolutely sucks.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some consideration to be made there. And then we've also got a question in the Discord channel from Mr. Cool Cam, who wants to know, what is our favorite contrarian stack on FanDuel? So
Yeah.
The Red Sox actually are not they're not crazy popular on FanDuel, but they still have 8% projected ownership. Let's say of all teams that are less than 5% owned on FanDuel, you're picking, actually, I'll give you 5% or lower. So the Astros could be your choice because they're at 5%. If you're playing contrarian team on FanDuel, Astros against Bailey Falter, is that the way you want to go?
That is, I think Houston probably. Yeah.
I'm going to go with the Atlanta Braves against Joe Ross. I've just never been a big fan of Joe Ross, other than when he first got, and I know you mentioned liking them on DraftKings as well. But Joe Ross, when he first got called up to the big leagues, his brother was Tyson Ross, if I remember correctly. He was a really good pitcher at the time, but he had arm issues. He got hurt a lot. It ended his career early. And Joe Ross, also guy who was a top pitching prospect, had a good amount of success his first couple of years in the league, and then just hasn't been able to stay healthy at all since. He's regressed a good amount. This year, 4.5 ERA, 4.44 expected ERA. His ground ball rate also not quite as high as it was earlier in his career. One thing that I do think is going to likely be more of an issue for Ross moving forward than it's been to this point, he's always been a guy that has a higher than league average home run to fly ball rate. That hasn't been the case so far this year, but he's only made 9 starts, 42 innings. Considering his home run to fly ball rates since 2017, I think we could pretty confidently say he's not going to maintain a 7.7% home run to fly ball rate here. So I do like stacking against him a good amount, which I know you also pointed out on the DraftKings side of things. Any other further thoughts on some of the FanDuel lineups we have in the lineup generator?
Yeah, looking at my FanDuel stuff, I have some Angels, which is a little bit weird on FanDuel. I don't really have them on DK. In Cal Quantrill, they're a little bit more popular on DK. What, the 5th highest known stack? On FanDuel, they are a little bit lower, I'm assuming, just based on the stuff that I just ran, but let me just double see. Yeah, 4.4% ownership there. Yeah, the Angels for sure. Better on FanDuel.
Hey, I'm Drew in Discord asked us what our thoughts on KC is tonight. Thoughts on KC specifically for tonight. One-offs or like them as a stack. Yeah, I've got 10% Mariners stacks on DraftKings. Bobby Witt Jr. has pretty frequently been one of my most rostered hitters, which is not unique to me. That's what the entire field has been doing, but it totally makes sense. Bobby Witt has been having a killer year this season. If it wasn't for the year Aaron Judge has had, Bobby Witt might be like running away with the MVP award. But mostly because of how good Bobby Witt looks, that probably does bring up some of my exposure to the Kansas City Royals, especially as a secondary stack. But yeah, I like the Royals today. How about yourself?
Yeah, I like the Royals today. I like the Royals a lot of the time, especially at the top of this lineup. You saw some really redeeming stuff from them yesterday. I bet them outright as a team. Didn't have a ton in DFS, but had a lot of Bobby Witt as a one-off. I know you talked about him today, having a lot of him as a one-off. He's one of the best hitters in baseball. And Sal Perez, first base catcher eligibility. You have MJ Melendez, Hunter Renfroe, both went deep yesterday. Jonathan Cannon is not very good. This is north of a 5 implied run total. I I don't see any reason that you shouldn't get to them. It's just that I think there's actually some better ballpark, like some better game environments that we have in Fenway. I think LA is pretty sneaky there with Cal Quantrill against Griffin Canning, who's pulling some ownership. The wind's blowing out there. It's like 78 and decently humid for LA this time of year. Yeah, I'm looking through some of these other game environments. I mean, you've got a number of places where if you decided that you wanted to make a big stand on the Royals today, I have no problem with it, but they're definitely going to be popular.
Yeah, not like problematic ownership. Although I don't think that there's any team that's so popular that it's a massive issue for the slate. We don't have any individual teams that are like 15,
Arizona
16,
and
17% owned. All we've got is the Mariners were slightly over 10%. And the Royals still 9% single digit ownership. And we have them a 9% chance to be the top scoring team on the slate, second to the Seattle Mariners. So yeah, the Royals are a team that to me warrants right around 10% ownership.
I hate Patrick Corbin. And yet I think that Arizona's going to end up a little bit over owned here. We've got them north of a flat, or well, they have a north of a 5 implied run total here, but like Jake McCarthy, Kevin Newman, Corbin Carroll, Geraldo Perdomo, the bottom 4 here. I mean, if you're not playing the main pieces here from Arizona, it gets really, really dicey. I'm probably not going to get to Arizona here, even though I know you feel the same way I do about Patrick Corbin, but they are just so popular relative to their chances of being the top stack.
One other thing I've noticed is it started with, remember there was the slate where the Mets were going up against Patrick Corbin. They weren't projected for much ownership, and you are like, all right, we're going to load up on the Mets. And then they just ended up being crazy popular that day. That wasn't really an isolated incident. We've seen numerous times that teams have ended up being a little bit more popular than projected against Patrick Corbin. So that could certainly end up being the case. I have 9% Diamondback stacks right now, by the way.
Yeah, large field, that's okay. But like, I'm looking at some single entry stuff here too. I think Arizona could end up way too popular relative to their chances of being successful.
Wouldn't be surprised with that in single entry at all. If you guys haven't done it yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Shout out to our friend Chris Williams, who gifted out another 5 YouTube memberships there. Let's talk about some contrarian stacks that we're liking for the slate, Eric, and then we'll do our home run picks here. Are there any really low-owned teams you like either for leverage or it's just a team that the field isn't getting to at all, like 2 or 3% on that you think the field should be getting to?
Yeah, did we not just break down Ryan Richardson? I mean, I love the Cubs for large field today. I think that there's just no doubt in my mind that this dude is one of the worst pitchers that we've seen at the big league level here. Trying to find my exposure here for it because my Cubs stuff just went away. I know that they're popular, but they're not nearly as popular as Arizona or Kansas City or Seattle. And I feel like I have the same applied run total, team total for them across the board. It's like 5.3, 5.3, 5.3. Seattle, a little bit better against James Paxton, great game environment and bad pitcher combination. But I love the Cubs for large field today. So that's one stack we haven't talked about. It's the only one amongst these tops other than Seattle that has positive leverage. Every other team, negative leverage in the top 8 chances of the top stack tool, like being the most successful one. San Francisco against JP Sears, Texas, Colorado, Arizona, Kansas City, all of them negatively leveraged, whereas Chicago looking like people aren't going to get there. And this guy is absolutely terrible.
We've talked about a lot of the contrarian stacks already that I think are worth considering. Like we've hit on the Boston Red Sox, Oakland A's, just for the leverage against a really popular Robbie Ray. One other one, though, is if you remember, we were talking about Matt Waldron's strikeout rate in his last start and how that's really dipped in the second half of the year. Considering a track record of Matt Waldron not being all that great, and then he kind of came out of nowhere to be decent earlier on in the year, and then he really started to regress a little bit. Not necessarily as a 5-man stack, but just the top bats in the Dodgers at the top of the order. I think it's a good secondary stack, but close to no ownership.
Yep, totally fine with that.
Yeah, Matt Waldron. Let's see the strikeout rate, just so I have it in front of me again. Yeah. So Matt Waldron's strikeout rate by month, May was 30%. Then June, it went down to 19%. Now July, 17%. So it's gotten worse as the year's gone on. And then also in the month of July, 4.56 FIP, 4.51 XFIP. It's just generally been a pitcher who, not like he's terrible, not one of the worst pitchers in baseball, but he's just been slightly below average and he's not really viewed that way. And you just got the Dodgers, one of the teams that have individually some of the top individual batters at the top of their lineup, I think makes sense as a smaller secondary stack there. Anything else you want to talk about as far as stacks go? If not, we'll do our home run picks.
Yeah, I think just getting to Colorado against LA, ninth inning bump opportunity. Yeah, it's not Coors Field, which always sucks, but this is still a really good hitter's park here. You have Griffin Canning, just a 15.9% K rate to to lefties with a 227 ISO allowed. I'm definitely going to try to get to the Blackmans, to Ryan McMahon, to Toglia, switch hitter, Jake Cave, Sam Hilliard. Like, there's enough lefties here in this lineup that I think they could really make Griffin Canning pay with this game environment. I think that that's another nice. I brought up the Red Sox last second yesterday. I thought I'd bring up Colorado last second today.
One other thing that I just noticed about the trade deadline, because I saw some people complaining about it on Twitter. Not the first time I've done it. The Colorado Rockies, who are going absolutely nowhere, just refuse to trade away their veteran players at the trade deadline every year. And they just walk in free agency for nothing, like the Trevor Story situation. Very bizarre what the Rockies end up deciding to do. But no moves made by the Rockies approaching the trade deadline. Guys, they definitely could have moved. But home run picks, Eric. Who you picking to go yard? Who is the dong of the day?
Let's go to, we want to talk positive leverage. Like, we want to talk as much leverage as humanly possible because, I'm not going to play a lot of this team as a 5-man stack, even though there's definitely reasons to get there. But I love Brent Rooker all the time. I mean, if you're going to give me like a 1%, 2% Brent Rooker in a spot against the most popular pitcher on the slate, you got to at least bring it up because Brent Rooker is on another planet. He has a 410 expected ISO against lefties. He breaks my spreadsheet every time I look at it. So, like, you want to talk about a one-off and somebody that you should just be giving a little bit of an ROI boost to get to like 8-10% of on a day like today. I'll get very, very contrarian, and relative to like what his ownership is in DFS, you're not going to go out and bet him today. But Brent Rooker, I will give him as your dong of the day.
I am going to go with Seiya Suzuki. I was trying to figure out a Cubs hitter that I wanted to take going up against Ryan Richardson in Cincinnati. I'm going to land on Seiya Suzuki as my pick. Let's see what we have from chat. I've got way too many tabs open right now. Where's the chat tab? Here it is. All right. From chat, starting with Obi-Wan, has got Shohei Ohtani. We've got Thomas Rensberger going with Cody Bellinger. EMAC, our old pal, has got Cal Raleigh. We've got Gavin Lux from Francisco Rubio. Randall Grichuk from Taco933. Comment God has got Cal Raleigh or Juan Yepez. Yepez comes up in the YouTube comments like every day now. Blake Moore, Jose Altuve. Robert Grease has got Jesse Winker. Ricardo Nelson is going with Brandon Nimmo. Nicholas Robertson has got Corey Seager. Where was the... Oh, here we go. Dangerous Dave, CJ Abrams, Casey Leatherwood, Ian Happ, and Mark Ventos. We've got Zach Neto from Red Cow. There's a contrarian pick. Michael Bush from Luca Lover, Michael Massey from Andy Melman, Rhino Hearn from Matt Comer, Cody Bellinger from William Westry. We've got Amaya and Ohtani from Obi-Wan there. Jeff McNeil from David Wayne. That feels like a shot at EMAC. You don't even know it's a shot at EMAC, but it is. Francisco Lindor from Aaron Hines. We got Ryan McMahon from Jake DeWitt. Devers Seager and Royce Lewis from Nice Kevin. And then we've got Adolis Garcia from Clintwood 8-3 and a double dong call on Corey Seager from Nicholas Robertson there. The Malukar's going with Isaac Paredes. Guys, thank you very much for watching. If you've not done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't forget, collect some free bonus bets over there from Bet365. $10 deposit, bet $5, you get $150 in bonus bets. Boom. It is that easy. Guys, once again, thank you very much for watching. Have a great night. We'll see you back here tomorrow.